Hello everyone, my name is Harold Campos. I am a Principal Program Manager for Azure Integration Services in Microsoft Corporation. Today I will be speaking about the Microsoft products for mainframe and mid-ranges integration. The agenda for this presentation is Azure Integration Services or AIS, the basics of mainframe and mid-ranges integration, common scenarios for legacy integration, AIS and mainframe modernization, and key takeaways. First of all, let's start with this statement. Integration is everything. Let's say your organization has the best applications, data, and systems, but none of them speak or connect with each other. With no integration, you will end up with just the applications that work in silos without adding any business value. Integration is everything. Integration is the backbone of applications. So, what is driving integration? First, integration modernization. Enterprises are increasingly using modern applications and platforms which have increased the propensity for integration. Plus, they are leveraging capabilities of legacy integration platforms to cover the demands of increasingly agile businesses, saving on time, resources, and costs. Cloud adoption. Organizations are rapidly adopting cloud and transforming their digital businesses to meet changing customer and business expectations. And to enable their digital transformation, they are looking out for robust integration tools that empower them with fast, secure, and easy maintenance integration platforms. And finally, developer productivity. Developers are the brains behind organizations. Organizations want developers to write codes to build new products and use integration to leverage existing mission critical capabilities. Let's talk about Azure Integration Services. Azure Integration Services is a set of Azure services that enable integration between systems, applications, and data. At the core of the service are Logic Apps, API management, Service Bus, and Event Grid, and extended with Azure Functions and Data Factory. Azure Integration Services are well connected with Microsoft Power Platform that extends the functional benefits of Azure Integration Services to citizen developers, making integration accessible for all. Now, Azure Integration Services includes BizTalk Server and Host Integration Server, products for integration with legacy mission critical applications and data. Um, It's important to mention that Azure Integration Services, or AIS, has been an industry leader in enterprise integration platform as a service. It is considered a market leader by Gartner as well as Forrester. For the last 6 years, Azure Integration Services is a market leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for Enterprise Integration Platform as a Service and market leader in Forrester Wave for Integration Platform as a Service for 2021. Azure API Management is a market leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for full lifecycle API management for the last 2 years. We will now talk about the role of Azure Integration Services in mainframes and midranges integration. Now, let's talk a little bit about the basics of mainframe and midranges integration. Let's start with SNA, HIS, and Azure Logic Apps. Defining SNA. SNA is an IBM networking architecture used by mainframes and midranges for data exchange. As you are aware, the IBM mainframes have been around for a while, 50, at least 50 years. So when IBM mainframes started, they had core capabilities to manage devices and internal facilities. So as such, it required an architecture, a networking architecture that was deterministic in nature. It uses a hierarchical method of definitions and leaves very little to chance. Bandwidth, connections, and users all needed to be predefined completely, or at least to some degree. So customers have used SNA APIs for years to build transaction-oriented programs. Conversion of existing SNA applications to IP-enabled applications proved to be uneconomical and very technical due to the complexity of the applications. In the 90s, there was a memo that stated that over $20 trillion had been invested in SNA applications in over 40,000 enterprises worldwide. According to surveys, SNA accounted for more than 60% of the WAN enterprise traffic and 68% of enterprise WAN budgets. So this is telling us how pervasive was SNA in the market back then. Now, as many companies have evolved their platforms and have upgraded their hardware and software, right? Many other companies have remained using core SNA applications, not necessarily the SNA protocol. Host Integration Server is a product that was first released in 1993, providing integration with IBM host systems. Originally, the product was an SNA gateway, providing the Windows implementation of the SNA network protocol and SNA APIs. Later, the scope of the product grew to include additional SNA features such as TN3270 server and SNA print server, integration with IBM's data stores, DB2, vSAM, Informix, IBM's transaction systems, CICS, IMS, IBMI, IBM's messaging, MQ series, and then TCP/IP support with no SNA dependencies. And finally, we have included the capabilities of the product in Azure Logic Apps service providers. Now, let's talk a little bit about HIS in the market. HIS is the only Windows-based solution for SNA integration. HIS is being used by the largest global industries that rely on legacy systems for mission-critical systems. HIS does not require footprint on the mainframe. HIS does not use IBM libraries for integration. We own our own implementation. That means a simpler model for licensing and agility. HIS allows our customers to integrate with mainframe and midranges legacy workloads, leaving them intact without requiring footprint on the mainframe or recoding transactions. Let's talk a little bit about some of the capabilities of HIS. HIS has 4 core segments. 1, networking support. 2, messaging support. 3, application support. And 4, data support. For the networking capabilities, it includes the SNA gateway, the TN3270 service, TN5250 service, SNA printing, and the HPR for SNA over IP communications. SNA APIs like CPIC, APPC, SLI, and RUI, and enterprise single sign-on for credential mapping. In messaging, it includes the BizTalk adapters for MQ, which are shipped with BizTalk server, and the MQ client. In application, it includes the transaction integration capabilities for CICS, IMS, IBMI, session integrator for 3270 and LUA programs, and BizTalk adapter for CICS, IMS, and IBMI. And for data, it includes data providers, services for DRDA, BizTalk adapters for DB2, and Informix and host files. Now, what is the relationship between HIS and Azure Integration Services or Azure Logic Apps? As we have stated before, HIS is part of Azure Integration Services. Now, HIS, as it's been available as a client-server product for many years, to install on VMs and licensed with BizTalk server. It means that if you want to acquire Host Integration Server today, you have to purchase a BizTalk server license. HIS technologies are being made available in Azure Integration Services via Azure Logic Apps connectors. No licensing is required for the core HIS technologies in this case. So if you see this diagram here, we have the full client-server product here with all of the capabilities in these blocks that can be installed on premises, an HIS client, or an HIS server, and on an Azure VM or any other cloud VM running as a client, as on a server. All of these capabilities are being moved to Azure Integration Services as we speak. So today we have connectors and adapters that leverage some of the core capabilities of Host Integration Server in Azure Integration Services, particularly in Logic Apps as Logic Apps connectors, like IBM MQ, IBM DB2, IBM host files and offline parser, IBM 3270, IBM CICS, and also we are working on releasing IMSDB and IMDC integration capabilities that are today available in the Host Integration Server on-premises product. There are a number of HIS Logic Apps connectors patterns available when you do want to integrate with HIS and legacy systems running on a mainframe or on a or in a mid-range. For instance, the application and software as a service integration pattern, or the integrating services systems with people pattern, or the real-time application pattern. If you do want to explore more of the um, patterns available for connecting HIS with the legacy world, so then you can visit our architecture center for where we have components for HIS and mainframe migration, and where you will find the role of host integration services and also the Azure Logic Apps connectors for HIS in Azure Integration Services available for all of these mainframe and mid-ranges modernization scenarios. Now, let's talk briefly about some of the common scenarios for HIS and Azure Logic Apps in Azure Integration Services. If we were to go to the financial services, one very typical um, scenario is the processing mortgages. Right? Today, if we are interested in buying a house, we schedule a meeting with an agent, with a realtor, right? After meeting the realtor, there is a pre-qualification mortgage application requested by someone to the bank, right? Then there is an offer sent to the owner. So then you are familiar, most likely familiar with this sequence of steps. Now, what you may be unaware of is that in many cases, HIS or host integration service is being used to translate and to transfer all of these transaction requests to a mainframe that is running the core banking systems that will process the mortgage, right? So all of these core capabilities that are being used um, um, by companies to integrate with these legacy systems are being also made available in Logic Apps connectors. So then instead of interacting with host integration server capabilities on premises, then if you are extending workloads in the cloud, you also have the capabilities, similar capabilities, to use those technologies, those core HAS technologies from Logic Apps workflow in this manner. Now, there is another typical scenario, which is ATM withdrawal with HIS. As we have SNA over IP capabilities, and we understand how to issue requests and transactions using APPC. So then typically a user goes to a bank, right? And then there's a client application that is leveraging the host integration server services to interact with a mainframe and then extract the information about the balance, right? And then issue the money in the ATM. So this is a predominantly on-premises scenario, but that can be extended to the cloud using Logic Apps workflow in Azure Integration Services, a host integration server if two-phase commit capabilities are required. One more scenario that is fairly common as well to find with HIS is a scenario with where we want to book a flight and the booking system resides on a mainframe. Even though there are alternatives to go directly to a specific data sources or files from a client application, typically they require a gateway such as host integration server, making the connection, the introduction, and then receiving the data that is coming from the host. This scenario can be altered to use Logic Apps in a manner where instead of having a host integration server on-premise server, so then you can have Logic Apps that are doing a similar work, but extending the ability to just not integrate to the mainframe or mid-range system, but also to work with other cloud-based systems that are usually built as a part of the customer journey to the cloud. So now, how would this look like from a topology perspective? If today we have clients that are of different kind, such as printers, Windows desktops, ATMs, terminals, web users, data users, on-premises admins, interacting with a tier of on-premises host integration server, so that will be used to broker connectivity to mainframe or mid-range system. Today, we can have an extension of that scenario where you will have all of the core services of host integration server available in Azure Logic Apps and Azure Integration Services, and residing in the cloud, and then being able to not only interact with the mainframe in the same manner as you had the on-premises product, but also to extend with other cloud native services and solutions. Again, so this is a scenario that allow the mainframe capabilities or your core capabilities that are residing in the mainframe being extended to leverage the power of the cloud. Another interesting scenario is managing modernization dependencies with Azure Integration Services. Let's imagine that you have a system that relies on host integration server to connect to a mainframe, extract data, and then populate it in a client application. Right? This is clearly a mission critical system. So if we were to have something similar, because after a mainframe has been migrated to let's say to the cloud running on a Micro Focus environment using enterprise server, so then you for you to avoid or for a customer to avoid refactoring the client applications, they could potentially use Logic Apps workflow and a combination of Logic Apps workflow in Azure Integration Services and Host Integration Server to interact with the new environment that replaces the mainframe, right? And then leverage the core capabilities for a product to manage the dependencies accordingly without having you refactoring all of the client applications in a manner of reducing the impact of this upgrade, this journey to the cloud. How this will look like. So as we just mentioned a few minutes ago, typically we have the clients interacting with the host integration server tier, application tier that is on premises and to a mainframe. So in this case, these clients that used to connect to these on-premises tier and then to the mainframe, now they will connect to the new environment that is residing on the cloud, where you have some core HIS components here providing the services of gateway if they are needed for specific applications. In many cases, you will not need them because you are upgrading to a new platform, but for those legacy systems that you really want to keep and leave them intact, as I said previously, then you can use our core integration components that are part of host integration server and the Azure Logic Apps connectors for HIS. Now, what happens if you are planning to build something more cloud native? So where you want to leverage cloud native patterns for the new mainframe target. So in this particular case, you can have something like this. You can have your containers running on Kubernetes. You can have a cloud native application, and you can leverage functions and logic apps and our connectors as well to keep backwards compatibility with the legacy clients without needing refactoring, right? Well, your architecture will remain cloud native now, right? But you will still have access to the to other legacy systems as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about managing data modernization dependencies with AIS. Imagine a world where you have client applications that are interacting with DB2. They are running on a Java client or other DB2 clients, and they are querying IBM DB2 to extract data from a table, right, and then show it in a in the screen, right? So then, if you have this, let's say that you have modernized your IBM DB2 and then you have migrated it to SQL Server or to SQL Server, right? So then for you to avoid refactoring this client application, we have a service called the DRDA service that allows you to do the translation between the commands that are sent by the client to what is replied by the server. So then you don't need to refactor your client application, but by using the DRDA service, you can interact with SQL Server as if you were interacting with DB2 before, right? So this is again an aspect of managing data modernization dependencies. So it decreases the disruption of your services if you do mainframe or mid-ranges modernization. How will this look like? It's actually fairly simple. Instead of connecting directly to DB2, all of the clients will be connecting now to a DRDA AES service that will be as of the front end of SQL Server. So then you migrate your data from DB2 to SQL Server, but the DRDA AES service will be receiving all of the requests from your legacy clients and will be translating them. So then SQL Server can provide the output that was originally provided by your DB2 system before. Now let's talk a little bit about AIS and mainframe modernization. Let's quickly explore how a mainframe is migrated. There are multiple approaches and there are multiple ways to categorize the modernization aspects of a mainframe migration, mainframe or mid-range migration. We have adopted this fairly simple standard. We call lift and shift when we do a rehost where the mainframe workload is migrated to the cloud as is. We call code conversion or refactor, taking the legacy code and recompiling it as Java or .NET Core code. We call rewrite or re-architect, rewriting the mainframe workload to take advantage of the full Azure benefits using modern agile application development techniques like containers or Azure Integration Services. And we call extend to augment mainframe workloads with new and additional Azure services and exposes data and workloads of the mainframe to the cloud. All of these in a consistent environment. There are other patterns such as replatform, lift and shift with changes, mainframe as a service, midranges as a service, or retire, right? So this is at the high level. These are at the high level the approaches that we have for mainframe modernization, mainframe and midranges modernization. Now, what is the role of AIS, Azure Integration Services, and the life cycle of a mainframe? If you do lift and shift, typically you are leveraging, you are keeping your existing COBOL programs, and what you are doing is you're changing the core platform to run into something more modern, typically in the cloud, right? But as I mentioned a few minutes ago, you still have to deal with the dependencies. So then that work that needs to happen with the dependencies can be addressed with Logic Apps workflow or ADF or host integration server. So then you can continue working with the newly migrated environment to the cloud. Now, if you were to do code conversions, then you have more possibilities to use and to extend your cloud native environment by using functions, service bus, event grid, API management, or ADF as well for data movement. In the cases where you need to rewrite, and you have the same freedom because you can leverage and extend and do anything because you are most likely building for a cloud native environment. And in the case of extend, which is basically integrate in here, you have a lot of freedom as well because you can leverage any available pattern to exchange data, because as I mentioned during this presentation, Azure Integration Services has different services that allow you to integrate with different technologies and patterns available. Again, there are other patterns that you can leverage for the mainframe and midranges modernization. However, it's important to mention that Azure Integration Services supports each mainframe modernization to Azure scenario, and the host integration server and the Azure Logic Apps connectors for mainframe and midranges enable true code legacy integration, low code. Now, what are the key takeaways of this presentation? First of all, the Microsoft products for mainframe and midranges integration are Host Integration Server and Azure Logic Apps, part of Azure Integration Services. Okay, our core mainframe and midranges integration technologies have been available for 30 years, supporting our mission-critical customers on premises and in the cloud. You can learn more at the following links: Host Integration Server site, Azure Logic App site, the Azure Architecture Center, and the Integration and Azure blog. And please reach out if you have further questions or need assistance with our technologies at hcampos@microsoft.com. I want to thank you for listening to this video, watching this video. Again, so I'm a Principal Program Manager for Azure Integration Services in Microsoft Corporation. And if you have further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you and have a great rest of the day.